Hello and welcome to the Analyst dated 27th August 2023 by Vajiram and Ravi, wherein we'll be looking into the important current affairs article from both the Hindu as well as Indian Express. And the handout of this very discussion is available in the description below. Let's have a look over the table of contents. So first topic relates to impact of climate change on health. Second relates to National Space Day. Third relates to human-animal conflicts. Fourth is precedent rule. And fifth is National Commission for Protection of Child Rights. Let's begin with our first article, which relates to impact of climate change on health. This issue pertains to this very aspect of your GS paper 2 and GS paper 3 syllabus. Let's try and understand the context. So the context is India is all set to open a climate change and health hub in New Delhi in partnership with Asian Development Bank. Now, the first thing that we need to understand with regard to this article is, what is this climate change all about? So, climate change basically refers to long-term shifts in temperature and weather patterns. Previously, this shift was on account of natural factors like volcanic eruptions. But in the current scenario, this shift is on account of anthropogenic factors like burning of fossil fuels, which is basically increasing the greenhouse gas emissions, prominently the carbon dioxide and methane. And these greenhouse gases, what they do, they trap the sun's heat and they are making the earth more and more warmer. Now, let's look into the impacts of climate change on health. In this regard, in 2008 itself, WHO has pointed out that climate change would be having considerable impact on global health. When it comes to the impacts of climate change, the first impact is on account of extreme temperatures. Now, on account of climate change, what we are witnessing is heat wave situations. What is heat wave? According to IMD, heat wave, a region is said to be witnessing heat wave situation when the temperature which that region is experiencing is 4.5 degree to 6.4 degree higher as compared to the temperature which is normally observed in this particular region A. So, on account of heat wave situations in Odisha way back in 1998, it claimed around 2,000 lives. Similarly, we witnessed heat wave situation in Chicago in 1995 and in Western Europe as well. So, it is anticipated that on account of climate change, such heat wave situations are going to become more frequent and more severe. So, it would be having a considerable impact on the global health situation. Then, what we are witnessing on account of climate change is extreme weather events, like we witnessed in Odisha in 1999. And similarly, we are witnessing flash situations in Uttarakhand. Now, how these extreme weather events basically have an impact on health? As it damages the health infrastructure. So, as it damages the health infrastructure, the capacity of our health system to basically cater to these disaster victims reduces. And it also impacts the food supply chains. So, through mechanisms, these extreme weather events have impact on health. Then, it is anticipated that on account of climate change, vector-borne diseases are going to increase in the coming future. Why? Let's try and understand. Now, on account of climate change, what we are witnessing nowadays is, let's suppose this region A was previously a drier region. But on account of climate change, this region is also witnessing flood situations. So, this region is also becoming more wetter. Since this region is also becoming more wetter, the vector-borne diseases could increase in this particular region. Then, on account of warmer temperature, the parasite in the malaria is able to develop very fastly. And that is the reason that the transmission period of malaria is getting increased, as we are witnessing in the highlands of America and Africa. And in this regard, WHO has pointed out that between 2030 and 2050, approximately 250,000 additional deaths per year the world is going to witness on account of malnutrition, malaria, and heat stress. Then, climate change is also going to have a considerable impact on food security. How come? On account of extreme climate events, the crop yield is getting impacted. And what we are witnessing on account of climate change is the duration of growth season for maize crop has decreased by 2% compared to 1981 and 2010. And when it comes to the duration of growth season for rice and wheat, it has also reduced by 1%. So as we can very well understand that this climate change is going to have an impact on the food availability. And how on account of this we are going to witness health problems? We are going to witness health issues like malnutrition, like anemia. We already know that when it comes to Indian women, around 50% of the women suffer from anemia. This is going to increase in the upcoming times on account of climate change. And lastly, it is anticipated that on account of climate change, respiratory diseases are going to increase. For example, it is anticipated that when it comes to asthma related deaths are going to increase by 20% in the next 10 years. Then, what needs to be done in this regard? First and foremost, we need to realize that yes, climate change is having certain impacts on the global health. And once we have realized this thing, we need to assess that in what ways climate change can lead to various health issues. And accordingly, we can take informed decision. Then we can take preventive measures like building green spaces in the urban areas. In this regard, we can adopt Miyawaki technique of urban forestry. Then we need global coordination with regard to effective implementation of Paris Climate Agreement, with regard to making sure that adequate climate finance is made available to the developing and the least developed countries. And we also need global coordination in order to assess that what all health challenges we are going to witness on account of climate change. And we also need global coordination in order to strengthen the global health infrastructure and system so that our health system is able to cater to the different set of health challenges that the humanity is going to witness on account of climate change. Then we also need to make certain lifestyle changes. What sort of lifestyle changes can we make? We can, adopt or switch to renewable energy resources. We can adopt eco-friendly transportation systems like e-vehicles. We can contribute in water harvesting, rainwater harvesting. We can also contribute in circular economy by, doing just a simple task, segregating wet and drier waste, so that waste could be converted into wealth. That is the idea of circular economy. And in this regard, Lacent, in one of its report in 2022, has pointed out that we need to make shifts in our dietary patterns. So we need to shift from dairy and meat products to plant-based diets. Why is it so? Because in dairy production and in production of meat, a lot of methane is emitted, which in turn aggravates the situation of climate change. And second reason, which was pointed out by the Lacent itself in its report, is that if we reduce the consumption of dairy products and meat products, we would be less susceptible to the zoonotic diseases like COVID-19. So these all steps we need to take in order to effectively tackle the health challenges which the humanity is going to witness on account of aggravating situation of climate change. That is all. Let's move to the next article. Now, this next article relates to the development in the domain of space. And this article pertains to this very aspect of your GS paper 3 syllabus. We also have a previous year question in this regard. So try and attempt this very question. Let's try and understand the context first. So the context is, recently the Prime Minister have announced that August 23 will be commemorated as National Space Day. Why is it so? Why we have chosen August 23 only? Because it is on this historic day that the lander of Chandrayaan 3 has landed on the lunar surface. Now, the next thing that we need to understand is, what is this National Space Day all about? So this National Space Day, in this we are going to celebrate the spirit of science, technology and innovation which inspires us for eternity. Let's look into the major milestones which India has attained in the domain of space. In 2013, we were able to successfully launch our first interplanetary mission, that is Mars Orbiter mission. This basically made India one of the 4 countries to attain this milestone. What are the other 3 countries? Those are European Union, Russia and America. This mission basically have the objective to observe the Mars surface and the atmosphere. Then we have NAVIC, that is India's regional navigation system, which provides real-time positioning information throughout Indian region and 1,500 kilometers around the Indian mainland. So it provides 2 kinds of services. One is for the civilians and the other one is for military, which is a restricted service. Okay? So it is basically to provide real-time positioning information. Then we have NISAR, which is a joint collaboration of ISRO and NASA. So it is one of kind of radar system which is going to do systematic mapping of the Earth. So in this we are going to use 2 bands of radar frequencies, that is L and S band. And this mission would be able to monitor even such changes in our Earth which are less than 1 centimeter also. Then we have launched Bhuvan 3.0 web portal. What we are going to do in this? We are going to collect high resolution images from our Earth observation satellite and we are going to provide those high resolution images and data to the panchayats so that they can effectively track their key assets and they could effectively carry out decentralized planning. Then in the domain of communication satellites, India has achieved great milestone. So we have our domestic communication satellite system, that is INSAT, which is one of the largest communication satellite system across the Asia Pacific region. And on account of these communication satellites, India has made great achievements in the domain of telecommunication and television broadcasting. Lastly, we have Astrosat, which we have launched in 2015. So through this satellite, what we are going to do is, we are going to simultaneously observe the astronomical objects in multi-wavelength, that is in X-ray, optical ray and UV spectral bands. Now, what is the significance of all these milestones which we have attained in the domain of space? It has great significance when it comes to our day-to-day life as well. In the domain of education, we have come across with satellite instructional television experiments in 1975, through which we basically provided informational television programs to the rural India. And we have our first dedicated educational satellite, that is GSAT, which is also known as EduSat. So it enabled distant classrooms education from lower classrooms to higher education as well. Then in the domain of agriculture, we have ResourceSat, we have ReSat. Through these satellites, what we are able to do is, we are able to effectively monitor the soil moisture, the soil health, the crop health, what all pests are attacking the crops, and this is basically enabling the farmers to make informed decision making. Then when it comes to the domain of weather forecasting, these 2 satellites have enabled the India to make great advancement when it comes to doing accurate weather forecasting. And it is in turn helping in the domain of agriculture, as well as it is also helping in the domain of disaster management. Because we are able to accurately forecast the weather. Then One of the important significance of carrying out space exploration is space mining, because it is anticipated that the celestial objects and the asteroids could provide us with infinite supply of resources like nickel, like cobalt, lithium, gold, etc. And it is also anticipated that in the outer space, water is available in abundance in one or the other form. So this is one of the major reasons why space explorations are carried out. Then in the domain of defense, through RESAT and CARTOSAT, we are able to effectively do the surveillance and the monitoring, especially in the border areas. So it is playing a very prominent role in enhancing our defense capabilities as well. Then, with the help of Earth observation satellites, we are able to do effective resource management. Earth observation satellite like CARTOSAT, IRS, etc. Resource management of land, water, forest, etc. So, on account of this Earth observation satellite, we are able to do effective urban planning. We are able to effectively plan how to use the land, how to use the water resources, etc. And lastly, these satellites have enables us to do great achievement in the domain of navigation through NAVIC. So it is helping in the domain of transportation, logistic, fisheries, as well as in disaster management. And this NAVIC, which is India's regional navigation satellite, has also served one another purpose. It has reduced our reliance on global positioning systems, okay, that is GPS. It has also enabled us to realize the idea of Atmanirbhar Bharat. So these all are the significance of the major milestones which India has attained in the domain of space. That is all that we need to know. Let's move to the next article. Now this next article relates to the issue of human-animal conflict. And this issue pertains to this very aspect of our GS paper 3 syllabus. Let's try and understand the context first. So the context is, recently Amla and Bale are being planted in Assam in a bid to secure a major elephant habitat and to mitigate human-animal conflicts. Now in this regard, the first thing that we need to understand is, what is human-animal conflict? So according to Worldwide Fund for Nature, human-animal conflict basically refers to such interactions between the human and the animals which have negative impacts for both of them. When it comes to human, on account of human-animal conflict, they witness crop losses or loss of their livestock. And when it comes to animals, what we are witnessing is death of the animals or killing of animals on account of human-animal conflict. Now, let's look into the causes of human-animal conflict. The first cause is changes in land use pattern. Now, we know that population is increasing. So, on account of increase in population, the demand for more and more land is increasing. On account of this, what we are doing is we are encroaching in forest region. That is something that we witnessed in Nilgiri Elephant Corridor. Here, resorts came into picture in this very corridor, which led to human-animal conflict in this very region, which was one of the major factors of human-animal conflict in this area. That is why in 2020, Supreme Court ordered the closure of such resorts which came up in this very region. Then, on account of habitat fragmentation, we are also witnessing human-animal conflict. Now, what is this habitat fragmentation? Let's just assume that this is a region A. This is a continuous forest area. So, animals can move from here to here, here to here, without any sort of interference. But what we do is, in this very region, we start building roads, we start building railways, we start doing agriculture in some patches. So, what we are doing? On account of these human intervention, we have basically divided this continuous forest area in small patches, which makes it difficult for the animals when it comes to their movement, which leads to human-animal conflict. And on account of habitat fragmentation, what we have witnessed is a lot of elephants have died on account of electrocution, on account of, train. Okay, so the elephants have got killed on account of electrocution and trains. because they are passing from there, from the forested regions. Then on account of climate change also we are witnessing human-animal conflict. How come? We right now studied that climate change leads to extreme weather events. This was something that was witnessed in Kaziranga National Park. So flood situation was there in this national park. On account of flood situation, the animals moved to a higher land, that is in Karbi Anglong Hills. And since this area is densely populated, so it led to human-animal conflict. Then there are issues in declaration of species as a vermin species. What are vermin species? Vermin species are species like nilgai, wild boar, which basically damages your crop and harms your livestock. Now, what are the issues when it comes to declaration of a species as vermin? When it comes to vermin species, under the Wildlife Protection Act, they could be hunted. But when it comes to Wildlife Protection Act, only the center government has the power to declare a species as vermin. But time and again the state governments keep on making a demand based on their local scenarios, based on the human-animal conflict that they are witnessing with regard to a particular species. They make a demand to the center that please declare this particular species as vermin, so that hunting of that animal could be allowed. But since this power is vested with the center, so it takes a lot of time, and this also leads to human-animal conflict. For example, in 2016, Center declared wild boar in Uttarakhand as a vermin species and nilgai in Bihar as a vermin species. So they can be hunted easily. Then on account of illegal poaching, what is happening is the prey base of predators is getting reduced. Predators are lions, tigers, etc. So now as their prey base is getting reduced, these predators now move to the regions which are inhabited by humans. Then they kill their livestock. And this basically brings these wild animals in conflict with humans. So these are some of the major causes of human-animal conflict. Let's look into the impacts of human-animal conflict. First and foremost, one of the major impacts is loss of biodiversity. In this regard, UNEP has pointed out that when it comes to human-animal conflict related incidents, it is impacting more than 75% of world's white cat species. Then, on account of human-animal conflict, the transmission of zoonotic diseases is also increasing. Since we are encroaching in their area, so the diseases which were earlier prevalent among the wild animals only, now it is transmitted to humans. For example, Nipah virus in Kerala, there was an outbreak, and this virus was transmitted to humans from fruit bats. Similarly, in Karnataka, there was an outbreak of Kaya Sanur forest disease, which is basically transmitted from monkey. Similar is the case with COVID-19. So on account of human-animal conflict, we are witnessing increased transmission of zoonotic diseases among the humans. Then it leads to economic losses, especially for the farmers, as we have discussed right now, that animals, when they come in the areas which are inhabited by humans, they do crop damage and they also eat their livestock. So it leads to economic losses, especially for the farmers in those regions. Then there could be ecological imbalances as well. How come? When you kill the predators who basically come in human inhabited region, what happens is the prey base start increasing. Now when predators are reducing, the prey base is increasing, what we'll be witnessing is ecological imbalance in the ecosystem. Then there could be conservation challenges as well. Why? Because on account of human-animal conflict, the humans develop a negative perception with regard to wildlife. So they would not be interested in conservation of these wildlife. Okay, so we would not be able to get the requisite community participation, which is very much required when it comes to the conservation of the wildlife. So these are some of the major impacts of human-animal conflict. Let's look into what needs to be done. Before we look into this aspect, let me tell you that government has taken certain measures. For example, it is providing crop insurance under Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana for crop damage which is being caused on account of human-animal conflict. But there are other steps that we need to take in order to effectively address this human-animal conflict. For example, the UNEP has highlighted in a Future of All Report 2021 that we need to adopt an approach of coexistence. We need to adopt such measures so that both the humans and the wildlife can peacefully coexist. For example, the steps that we are taken in the Uttarakhand region, like biofencing of the human inhabited region, okay? And in Odisha, what we are doing is, we are increasing the food and fodder in the forested region as well, okay? Through casting seed balls in the forest region, so that the wildlife do not have to come to areas which are inhabited by humans in search of food and fodder. Then we can build wildlife corridors as well, as is being done in Canada. What are these wildlife corridors? These are basically the safe pathways for animals in an area which is inhabited by humans. Then we can adopt other innovative techniques as well, as is being done in Project Rehab. What we are doing in this? In this, the areas which are witnessing conflict between humans and elephants, what we have done is, we place a box in which bees are there. So as elephants are, scared of bees, so they do not enter in this human inhabited region. So we can adopt such innovative techniques as well in order to avoid human-animal conflict. And similarly, such innovative technique has also been being carried out in Tanzania region, wherein, since the farmers know that the elephants do not like one of the chemical which is there in chili pepper. So what they are doing is, they are fencing the human inhabited regions through chili pepper, so that we can avoid conflicts between humans and elephants in that region. And lastly, we can, provide requisite skill to the local communities so that we could reduce their dependence on agriculture. And as their dependence on agriculture would reduce, they would not, encroach in the forest region. That would also help us in reducing the human-animal conflict. That is all that we need to discuss with regard to this article. Let's move to the next one. Now, this next article is related to this very aspect of your GS Paper 2 syllabus, and it is related to precedence rule. Now, let's look into the context first. Recently, the Punjab governor has threatened that he would be recommending imposition of precedent rule in the Punjab state. Now, the first thing that we need to understand with regard to this article is, what are emergency provisions? So, emergency provisions are enshrined in the Indian Constitution so as to enable the central government to effectively deal with abnormal situations, abnormal circumstances, and to safeguard the sovereignty, unity, integrity and security of Indian state. So when it comes to Indian Constitution, three kind of emergencies are provided. National emergency under Article 352, Precedent Rule under Article 356 and Financial emergency under Article 360. Now, let's look into the Precedence Rule. Now, the precedent rule is imposed, as I told you, under Article 356 of the Indian Constitution. On what grounds it is imposed? If the precedent is satisfied that the governance in a particular state is not being carried out in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution. So, in that regard, the president can impose precedent rule in that particular state. This the president can do on the basis of the governor's report or otherwise as well. Another condition on which the central government can impose precedent rule in a particular state is provided under Article 365 of the Indian Constitution. What this article states? This states that if a state fails to comply or if it fails to give effect to any of the directions which was given by the central government, then the president would be satisfied that yes, when it comes to this particular state, the government cannot be carried out in that particular state in accordance with the constitutional provisions. So on these two bases, the precedent rule can be imposed in a particular state. Now, what is the process of approval of precedent rules proclamation? So on the day the president proclaimed precedent rule in a particular state, okay, so within 2 months time frame, both the houses of the parliament has to approve this precedent rule by simple majority. What do we mean by simple majority? That is majority of the members present and voting. And once it has been approved by the parliament, the precedent rule would continue to remain in operation for 6 months. And after 6 months, again, if the central government wants the precedent rule to continue in that particular state, then again you need parliamentary approval. Again, that parliamentary approval would be passed by simple majority in both the houses. Then, when it comes to the maximum duration till which the precedent rule can remain in force in a particular state, that is 3 years. But in this regard, the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act 1978 has bring in a safeguard. According to this Constitutional Amendment Act, the precedent rule can be extended in a particular state beyond a period of 1 year only if these two conditions are satisfied. First is, if the national emergency is under operation in whole of India or in whole or part of a state, or if the Election Commission of India certifies that it is difficult to hold general election for the state legislative assembly on account of certain difficulties. So if these conditions are satisfied, only then the precedent rule can be extended beyond a period of 1 year. This was something which was provided by 44th Constitutional Amendment Act. So when it comes to revocation of precedent rule, this could be done by the president by a subsequent proclamation. That does not require parliamentary approval in this regard. Now, what are the consequences of precedent rule? First is, the president can assume the function of state government or the governor. So in this regard, the president basically dismisses the Council of Ministers headed by the Chief Minister. And when the precedent rule is proclaimed in a particular state, it is the parliament which gets the power to legislate for that particular state. And then it is up to the parliament that whether the parliament wants to delegate this particular law-making function to president or to any other authority or not. Then the president gets the power to make incidental provision and suspend constitutional provisions regarding a particular body. But even when precedent rule is under operation in a particular state, the president do not get the power to suspend the constitutional provisions which are related to High Court of that particular state. So even if precedent rule is under operation in a particular state, the president cannot assume to himself the power of state high courts. Then when it comes to the state legislative assemblies, they would either be suspended or they would be dissolved. Why I am saying so? Because in S.R. Bomai judgment of 1994, the Supreme Court has stated that the state legislative assembly would be dissolved only when the precedent rule has been approved by the parliament. In the meantime of 2 months that we discussed, the state legislative assembly would remain suspended. It would not be dissolved. So if the parliament does not approve the precedent rule proclamation in that particular state, then the state legislative assembly would be reinstated. And in S.R. Bomai judgment, the Supreme Court also stated that when it comes to the satisfaction of the president with regard to proclamation of precedent rule, that is subjected to judicial review. That is all with regard to this article. Let's move to the next one. Now, this last article relates to National Commission for Protection of Child Rights, and this relates to this very aspect of our GS paper 2 syllabus. Let's try and understand the context. So the context is, an FIR has been registered against a UP teacher as she has asked all the students of the class to hit their Muslim classmate. Now we are not going to go into this very news because this news is not very important, but the context, the body that has been mentioned with regard to this very news is important. That is National Commission for Protection of Child Right. Because with regard to this issue, National Commission for Protection of Child Right has taken suo motu action in this regard. Let's try and understand about this body. So this body is basically a statutory body as it has been created through Commission for Protection of Child Rights Act 2005 and it came into operation in 2007. This body is basically working under the Ministry of Women and Child Development and according to this body, such individual would be considered as a child whose age lies in the age bracket of 0 to 18 years. And when it comes to the members of this commission, we have a chairperson and 6 members, and out of these 6 members, at least 2 should be women. The members and the chairpersons are basically appointed by the central government for a term of 3 years. When it comes to the mandate of this very commission, it is to make sure that all the laws, the administrative mechanism is in alignment with the child rights perspective which is enshrined in the Indian Constitution and it is also aligned with the UN Convention on Rights of the Child. Another mandate of this very commission is to monitor the effective implementation of these 3 acts that are there. That is Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act 2012, Juvenile Justice Care and Protection of Children Act 2015 and Right to Freedom and Compulsory Education 2009. That is all that we need to know from today's newspaper. Thank you for listening to this very discussion and all the very best for your preparation.